In a world where social media dictates fashion trends and wedding guests compete for the most Instagram-worthy outfits, one woman's authentic choice at an extravagant Jordanian celebration reminded everyone what true elegance really means. When Catherine stepped into the marble-floored ballroom of Amman's most prestigious venue, she wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't following any trend. She simply wore what felt right to her heart. What happened next would be talked about for months, shared across continents, and become the kind of story that restores faith in genuine human connection. Sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is simply being yourself. This is the true story of how one woman's authentic choice at a lavish Middle Eastern wedding created ripples of admiration that reached far beyond the golden walls of that magical evening. Catherine Martinez had always been the type of person who preferred comfortable shoes over high heels and meaningful conversations over small talk. At 32, she worked as a cultural anthropologist, spending her days studying human behavior and social customs around the world. Her work had taken her to remote villages in Peru, bustling markets in Morocco, and ancient temples in Cambodia. She had learned to appreciate the beauty in different cultures while staying true to her own values and comfort. When the invitation arrived in her small apartment in Boston, Catherine almost couldn't believe it. The thick, cream-colored cardstock was embossed with gold Arabic calligraphy, and the English translation revealed that she was invited to the wedding of Amira al-Rashid and Omar Hassan in Amman, Jordan. Amira had been her roommate during graduate school at Harvard, and despite their different backgrounds, they had formed a deep friendship over late-night study sessions and shared dreams of making the world a better place. Catherine remembered how Amira used to talk about her homeland with such passion, describing the warm hospitality of her people, the ancient history carved into every stone, and the way her grandmother would prepare traditional meals that could feed an entire neighborhood. When Amira had returned to Jordan after graduation to work with refugee communities, Catherine had promised to visit someday. Now, 5 years later, that promise was finally being fulfilled through this wedding invitation. The invitation itself was a work of art. Inside the main card, there were smaller inserts written in both Arabic and English, explaining the various ceremonies and celebrations that would take place over 3 days. Catherine studied each detail carefully, wanting to understand and respect every tradition. There would be a henna ceremony for the women, a traditional Jordanian feast, and, finally, the wedding celebration itself. The main event would be held at the Royal Palace Hotel, one of Amman's most prestigious venues, known for hosting dignitaries and celebrities from around the world. As Catherine read through the invitation, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had attended weddings before, but never one of this magnitude or cultural significance. The guest list, according to Amir's excited phone call, would include over 400 people, ranging from government officials to international business leaders, along with extended family members from across the Middle East. It was going to be a grand celebration of not just two people's love, but also a merging of two prominent Jordanian families. The first challenge Catherine faced was understanding the dress code. The invitation mentioned formal attire respecting local customs, but Catherine wanted to make sure she got it right. She spent hours researching appropriate wedding guest attire for Jordan, learning about modesty requirements and cultural expectations. She discovered that while Jordan was relatively liberal compared to some of its neighbors, showing respect through clothing choices was still very important, especially at such a significant family event. Catherine decided to reach out to Amira directly for guidance, but her friend was completely overwhelmed with wedding preparations. When they finally managed to have a brief phone conversation, Amira was rushing between dress fittings and family meetings. Just for something beautiful and modest, Catherine, Amira had said breathlessly, "You always have such wonderful taste, and I trust you completely. I'm just so happy you're coming. I can't wait for you to meet everyone and see Jordan through my eyes." The conversation left Catherine feeling even more uncertain. What exactly constituted beautiful and modest in this context? She began visiting boutiques and department stores, looking for something that would be appropriate for such a grand occasion. The sales assistants showed her elaborate gowns with intricate beadwork, flowing fabrics in jewel tones, and sophisticated cocktail dresses that seemed perfect for a high-society wedding. However, something about these options didn't feel right to Catherine. As she stood in front of her bedroom mirror one evening, surrounded by shopping bags and potential outfit choices, Catherine realized what was bothering her. All of these beautiful clothes felt like costumes, like she was trying to be someone she wasn't. She had always been most comfortable when she could be authentic to herself, and wearing something that felt foreign to her personality seemed like starting the celebration on the wrong note. Catherine thought back to her travels and the times when she had felt most welcomed by local communities. It wasn't when she tried to dress like them or adopt their customs superficially. Instead, people had responded most warmly when she showed genuine respect and interest while being true to her own character. She remembered a village elder in Guatemala who had told her, "The best gift you can give us is your authentic self. When you pretend to be something you're not, we cannot truly know you, and friendship becomes impossible." This memory sparked an idea in Catherine's mind. Instead of trying to transform herself into someone who would fit into a glamorous Jordanian wedding, perhaps she could find a way to be respectfully authentic. She began researching traditional American clothing that might be appropriate for the occasion, thinking about her own cultural heritage and how she could honor both her background and her host traditions. Catherine's grandmother had immigrated to the United States from Ireland in the 1940s, and she had always treasured the stories of the beautiful clothing her family had worn for special occasions. Her grandmother had described elegant dresses made from fine fabrics, often in deep, rich colors that complemented the natural beauty of the Irish countryside. These weren't flashy or attention-seeking garments, but rather pieces that spoke of dignity, respect, and timeless elegance. Inspired by these family stories, Catherine began looking for something that would reflect this kind of understated sophistication. She visited vintage stores and spoke with seamstresses about creating something unique. During this search, she discovered a small boutique run by an elderly woman named Mrs. Chun, who specialized in creating custom pieces that honored different cultural traditions while maintaining modern sensibilities. Mrs. Chun listened carefully as Catherine explained her situation. The older woman nodded thoughtfully and said, "You want to dress like yourself, but in a way that shows respect for your friends and their traditions. This is very wise. Let me show you something that might work." She led Catherine to a corner of the shop where there were fabrics in deep, jewel-like colors and patterns that seemed both timeless and elegant. Together, they designed a dress that would be perfect for Catherine's needs. It would be made from a deep emerald green silk that complemented Catherine's auburn hair and fair skin. The style would be modest with long sleeves and a neckline that was elegant but conservative. The cut would be classic and flattering without being too form-fitting, and the length would fall just below the knee, appropriate for the cultural context while still feeling natural to Catherine. The dress would have subtle details that reflected Catherine's personality and heritage. Mrs. Chun suggested adding delicate embroidery inspired by traditional Celtic knots, worked in gold thread around the cuffs and neckline. This would be a beautiful way to honor Catherine's Irish roots while creating something that would be respectful and appropriate for a Jordanian wedding. The embroidery would be subtle enough not to draw attention away from the bride, but meaningful enough to represent Catherine's authentic self. As Mrs. Chun took Catherine's measurements and they discussed the final details of the dress, Catherine felt a sense of relief and excitement. This felt right. She wasn't trying to be someone else, but she was making an effort to present herself in the most respectful and beautiful way possible. The dress would be elegant without being ostentatious, modest without being dowdy, and personal without being inappropriate. While the dress was being made, Catherine spent time learning more about Jordanian culture and wedding traditions. She read about the significance of different ceremonial elements, the importance of family in Jordanian society, and the ways that hospitality was expressed in Middle Eastern cultures. She also practiced some basic Arabic greetings and phrases that she could use to show respect to Amira's family members who might not speak English fluently. Catherine arranged for time off from work and booked her flight to Amman. As the departure date approached, she felt increasingly excited about the adventure ahead. She had traveled extensively, but this trip felt different because it was so personal. She wasn't going to Jordan as a researcher or tourist, but as a friend celebrating one of the most important days in Amira's life. The night before her departure, Catherine carefully packed her suitcase, including the beautiful emerald dress that Mrs. Chun had created. As she folded the garment in tissue paper, she thought about the journey that had led to this moment. From receiving the invitation to creating this perfect dress, every step had been about finding a way to honor both herself and her hosts. She had learned that authenticity didn't mean being unchanging or inflexible. Instead, it meant finding ways to express your true self while respecting and celebrating the people around you. Catherine also packed a small gift for Amira and Omar, something she had chosen with great care. During her research about Jordanian culture, she had learned about the importance of olive trees in Middle Eastern traditions, symbolizing peace, prosperity, and enduring friendship. She had commissioned a local artist to create a small sculpture of an olive branch, made from silver and embedded with small emeralds that match her dress. The piece was elegant and meaningful, representing the peace and prosperity she wished for the couple's marriage. As Catherine settled into her airplane seat the next morning, she felt a mixture of anticipation and gratitude. She was grateful for Amira's friendship, for the opportunity to experience a different culture in such a meaningful way, and for the learning process that had led her to this moment. She had no idea that her thoughtful choices were about to create an impact far beyond what she could have imagined. The flight to Amman was long but comfortable, and Catherine spent much of it reading a book about Jordan's history and culture that she had purchased specifically for this trip. She learned about the country's role as a crossroads between different civilizations, its reputation for stability and hospitality in an often turbulent region, and the way that ancient traditions continued to thrive alongside modern development. By the time the plane began its descent into Queen Alia International Airport, Catherine felt more prepared and excited than nervous. As the aircraft touched down on Jordanian soil, Catherine looked out the window at the landscape below. The late afternoon sun cast everything in a golden light, and she could see the hills and valleys that surrounded Amman stretching into the distance. This was the beginning of an adventure that would be far more memorable and meaningful than she could have possibly anticipated. The heat hit Catherine immediately as she stepped off the plane at Queen Alia International Airport. Even though it was evening, the warm, dry air was unlike anything she had experienced in Boston. She took a deep breath, smelling unfamiliar spices and dust mixed with the scent of jet fuel. Everything felt different here, from the architecture visible through the terminal windows to the melodic sound of Arabic conversations flowing around her. Amira had arranged for a driver to meet Catherine at the airport. As she made her way through customs and immigration, Catherine marveled at the efficiency and modernity of the facility. The airport was beautiful, with soaring ceilings and decorative elements that reflected traditional Jordanian design while maintaining a thoroughly contemporary feel. It was her first indication that Jordan might be different from the stereotypes she had unconsciously absorbed about Middle Eastern countries. The driver, a middle-aged man named Hassan, greeted Catherine with a warm smile and impeccable English. As they loaded her luggage into his pristine sedan, he began what would be the first of many conversations about Jordan that would deepen her understanding of the country. "First time in Jordan?" he asked as they pulled away from the airport. When Catherine nodded, his face lit up with genuine pleasure. "You will love it here. We Jordanians, we take care of our guests. It is our tradition." The drive to Amman took about 45 minutes, and Hassan used every moment to point out interesting sights and share stories about his country. He showed her ancient ruins visible from the highway, explained the significance of different neighborhoods they passed through, and described the upcoming wedding celebrations with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely loved his culture. Jordanian weddings, he said with a chuckle, they're not just parties. They are celebrations of life, family, community. You will see. As they entered the outskirts of Amman, Catherine was struck by the way ancient and modern seemed to coexist seamlessly. Roman ruins sat next to contemporary office buildings, and traditional stone houses were interspersed with glass and steel structures that wouldn't look out of place in any major international city. The hills that surrounded the city were dotted with lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk, creating a magical atmosphere that made Catherine feel like she was entering a fairy tale. Hassan delivered Catherine to her hotel, a boutique establishment in one of Amman's upscale neighborhoods. The lobby was an elegant blend of traditional Jordanian design elements and modern luxury, with intricate mosaic work on the walls and comfortable seating areas where guests could relax and enjoy Arabic coffee or tea. The staff greeted Catherine warmly in English, and she was impressed by their professionalism and genuine hospitality. Her room was beautiful, with a balcony that offered a view over the city lights. After Hassan left, and she had tipped him generously for his kindness and informative tour, Catherine stood on her balcony and looked out over Amman. The city spread out below her in all directions, a tapestry of lights and shadows that seemed to pulse with life and energy. She could hear the distant sounds of traffic and conversation, and occasionally the call to prayer from nearby mosques, creating a soundtrack that was completely foreign yet somehow comforting. Catherine unpacked her suitcase carefully, hanging up the emerald dress and admiring how beautiful it looked even in the hotel room's artificial light. She was pleased with her choice and felt confident that it would be appropriate for the celebration ahead. After a light dinner from room service, featuring delicious Middle Eastern dishes that the hotel staff had recommended, she settled in for the night, knowing that the next few days would be busy and exciting. The following morning, Catherine woke early, partly due to jet lag and partly from excitement. She had arranged to meet Amira for breakfast before the wedding preparations began in earnest. As she got dressed in casual clothes suitable for the warm weather, she looked forward to seeing her friend again and meeting the family that had raised such a wonderful woman. The restaurant where they were meeting was in one of Amman's historic neighborhoods, and Catherine took a taxi through streets lined with traditional stone buildings and modern shops. The contrast was fascinating, and she found herself wishing she had more time to explore the city properly. Perhaps after the wedding, she could extend her stay and do some sightseeing. Amira was already waiting when Catherine arrived, and the reunion was emotional and joyful. Despite the years that had passed since they had seen each other, their friendship picked up exactly where it had left off. Amira looked radiant, with a glow that comes from being deeply in love and thoroughly excited about the future. She was dressed casually, but elegantly, and Catherine could see that she had grown more confident and poised during her years back in Jordan. "Catherine, I can't believe you're actually here," Amira exclaimed as they embraced. "You look wonderful. How was your flight? Are you tired? Excited? Tell me everything." Her enthusiasm was infectious, and Catherine found herself laughing with pure joy at being reunited with her friend. Over a breakfast of fresh bread, olives, cheese, and strong Arabic coffee, Amira filled Catherine in on the final wedding preparations and introduced her to the schedule for the next few days. "Tonight is the henna ceremony in my family's house," Amira explained. "It's just for women, and it's more casual than the main wedding. You'll get to meet my mother, my sisters, my aunts, and all my female cousins. They're so excited to meet you. I've told them so many stories about our time at Harvard." Catherine felt a flutter of nervousness at the thought of meeting Amira's entire extended family, but her friend quickly reassured her. "Don't worry, they'll love you. My mother especially is looking forward to meeting you." She says any friend who would travel so far to be at my wedding must be a very special person. And my grandmother, she's 93 and still sharp as a tack. She's been asking about the American friend who studies different cultures. I think you two will get along wonderfully. Amira went on to describe the main wedding celebration, which would take place the following evening at the Royal Palace Hotel. It's going to be quite grand, she admitted with a slightly embarrassed smile. Omar's family is very prominent in business here, and my father is well connected in government circles. The guest list has grown and grown until it's become this huge event. Sometimes I wish we had eloped. She laughed, but Catherine could see that despite any overwhelm she might feel, Amira was genuinely excited about the celebration. Tell me about Omar, Catherine requested. She had heard about him in their phone conversations, but she was curious to learn more about the man who had captured her friend's heart. Amira's face softened as she began describing her fiancé. He's wonderful, Catherine. He's kind and funny, and he shares my passion for helping refugee families. We actually met at a community center where we were both volunteering. He was teaching English classes, and I was helping families navigate the healthcare system. Amira explained that Omar worked in international development, focusing on creating sustainable business opportunities in refugee communities. He's not like some of the men I dated before, who were only interested in superficial things. Omar wants to make a real difference in the world, just like we used to talk about doing when we were in school. And he makes me laugh every single day. Even during all this wedding craziness, he finds ways to make me smile. The conversation naturally turned to Catherine's work and life in Boston. Amira was fascinated to hear about Catherine's recent research projects and the places she had traveled for fieldwork. I've always admired how you stay true to yourself no matter where you go, Amira said thoughtfully. Even in graduate school, when everyone was trying so hard to impress professors and fit into certain academic molds, you always maintained your own perspective and values. It's one of the things I've always loved about our friendship. This comment made Catherine think about her dress choice and her approach to the upcoming celebrations. I have to admit, I was worried about what to wear to your wedding, she confessed. I wanted to be respectful and appropriate, but I also wanted to feel like myself. It's been an interesting process figuring out how to balance those things. Amira smiled warmly. Whatever you've chosen, I'm sure it's perfect. You have such good instincts about these things. And honestly, Catherine, just having you here means more to me than any outfit ever could. When I was planning this wedding, one of the things that made me saddest was thinking that my closest friend from America might not be able to come. When you said yes, it made everything feel complete. After breakfast, Amira took Catherine on a brief tour of some of Amman's most significant sites. They visited the ancient Roman theater, where Catherine marveled at the preservation of the structure and the way it was still used for cultural events. They walked through the bustling downtown markets, where the sounds and smells created a sensory experience unlike anything Catherine had encountered. Vendors called out greetings in Arabic and broken English, offering everything from spices and textiles to handmade jewelry and traditional sweets. At one point, they stopped at a shop that sold traditional Jordanian clothing and accessories. The elderly shopkeeper, upon learning that Catherine was visiting for Amira's wedding, insisted on showing them some of the most beautiful pieces in his collection. He brought out intricately embroidered dresses, delicate jewelry, and silk scarves in colors that seemed to capture the essence of the Jordanian landscape. For wedding guests, you need something special, he said to Catherine with a kind smile. Something that shows respect for family, for tradition. Amira translated some of his Arabic comments, explaining that he was complimenting Catherine's respectful attitude and expressing his appreciation that she had traveled so far to honor her friend's marriage. Catherine admired the beautiful items he showed them, but she felt even more confident in her choice of the emerald dress. These traditional pieces were stunning, but they would have felt like costumes on her. Her dress would allow her to show respect while remaining authentic to her own style and heritage. As the afternoon progressed, Amira needed to return home to begin preparing for the henna ceremony. She gave Catherine detailed directions to her family's house and assured her that someone would be available to help translate if needed. "Don't worry about language barriers," Amira said. "Hospitality is a universal language, and my family speaks it fluently. You'll be taken care of." Catherine spent the rest of the afternoon exploring her hotel's neighborhood and resting before the evening's festivities. She took a nap to combat the jet lag, and then spent time getting ready for the henna ceremony. For this event, she had chosen a simple but elegant outfit that would be appropriate for the more casual, intimate gathering of women. As she prepared to leave for Amira's family home, Catherine reflected on the day's experiences. Everything about Jordan had exceeded her expectations. The people were warm and welcoming, the culture was rich and fascinating, and the blend of ancient and modern created an atmosphere that felt both exotic and comfortable. She was beginning to understand why Amira had been so eager to return to her homeland after completing her education in the United States. The taxi ride to Amira's family home took her through neighborhoods she hadn't seen earlier, giving her another perspective on the city. Some areas were clearly affluent, with large houses set behind walls and gates, while others were more middle class, with apartment buildings and smaller homes clustered together. Throughout it all, she saw evidence of the strong community bonds that Amira had often described, with people gathering in small groups to talk, children playing in the streets under the watchful eyes of their elders, and shops that seemed to serve as community gathering places. When the taxi pulled up in front of Amira's family home, Catherine was impressed by the beautiful architecture and the obvious care that had been taken with the landscaping. The house was traditional in style, but clearly well-maintained and updated with modern conveniences. She could hear the sounds of women's voices and laughter coming from within, creating an atmosphere of celebration and joy that made her feel welcome even before she rang the doorbell. As Catherine stood at the threshold of Amira's family home, about to experience her first traditional Jordanian celebration, she felt a mixture of excitement and gratitude. This was exactly the kind of cultural exchange she had always hoped to experience, not as an outside observer studying customs and traditions, but as a welcomed participant in a genuinely meaningful celebration. The emerald dress hanging in her hotel room was ready for tomorrow's grand celebration, but tonight was about something different, something more intimate and personal. Tonight was about friendship, tradition, and the universal bonds that connect women across cultures as they celebrate love and new beginnings. The front door of the Al-Rashid family home opened before Catherine could ring the bell, and she was immediately enveloped in warmth, fragrant air, and the sound of women's voices speaking in rapid, musical Arabic. Amira's mother, Layla, greeted Catherine with a smile so genuine and welcoming that any nervousness she might have felt melted away instantly. "Catherine, welcome to our home," Layla said in accented but fluent English, taking Catherine's hands in both of hers. "Amira has told us so much about you. You are not a guest here, you are family." This greeting, Catherine would later learn, was not just politeness, but a reflection of the deep Jordanian tradition of hospitality that considers hosting others to be both an honor and a responsibility. As Layla led Catherine into the house, she was struck by the beautiful interior design that blended traditional Middle Eastern elements with contemporary comfort. Rich carpets covered marble floors, and the walls were decorated with intricate geometric patterns and family photographs spanning several generations. The furniture was elegant and comfortable, arranged in conversation areas that encouraged gathering and socializing. The sound of women's laughter and conversation grew louder as they approached the main living area, where Catherine could see dozens of women of all ages gathered together. Some were sitting on low cushions around the room's perimeter, while others clustered around small tables laden with sweets, nuts, and tea service. The atmosphere was festive and relaxed, with an energy that spoke of long-standing friendships and family bonds. Amira spotted Catherine immediately and rushed over to embrace her friend. "You made it. Come, you have to meet everyone," She began introducing Catherine around the room, and the warmth with which she was received was overwhelming. Each woman took time to greet Catherine personally, many in English, but some through Amira's translation. They asked about her journey, her impressions of Jordan, and her work as an anthropologist with genuine curiosity and interest. Catherine found herself in conversation with Amira's grandmother, Fatima, a tiny woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and hands decorated with intricate henna patterns that had been applied earlier in the evening. Despite the language barrier, they communicated remarkably well through gestures, smiles, and Amira's occasional translation. Fatima examined Catherine's hands with interest and began speaking rapidly in Arabic. She says, "You have good hands for henna." Amira translated with a laugh. She wants to know if you would like her to decorate them for you. It's considered good luck for unmarried women to wear henna at weddings. Catherine was touched by the invitation and agreed immediately, understanding that this was both an honor and a way to participate more fully in the celebration. As Fatima began applying the intricate henna designs to Catherine's hands, using a small cone filled with the dark paste, Catherine marveled at the older woman's skill and artistry. The patterns were incredibly detailed, with flowing lines and geometric shapes that seemed to tell a story. Other women gathered around to watch and offer suggestions, and Catherine realized that this was as much a social activity as it was decorative. During the henna application process, Catherine learned more about the traditions surrounding this ceremony. The henna was made from natural plants and would stain her skin a reddish-brown color that would last for several weeks, serving as a reminder of this special celebration long after she returned to Boston. The patterns being applied were not random, but carried symbolic meaning, representing good fortune, protection, and joy. While her henna dried, Catherine was treated to an incredible feast of traditional Jordanian sweets and delicacies that the women had prepared for the evening. There were honey-soaked pastries, nuts, and dried fruits, and small glasses of sweet mint tea that seemed to be continuously refilled. Each item she tasted was more delicious than the last, and the women took obvious pleasure in watching her enjoy their culinary traditions. The conversation flowed easily despite the language differences, with women switching between Arabic and English to include Catherine in discussions about everything from children and work to travel and current events. Catherine was impressed by how well-informed and engaged these women were with world affairs, and how many of them had traveled extensively or had family members living in different countries. As the evening progressed, Catherine learned more about each family member and their role in the upcoming wedding. Amira's aunt was coordinating all the catering for the main celebration, working with the hotel's kitchen staff to ensure that traditional Jordanian dishes will be served alongside international cuisine. Her cousin was managing the floral arrangements, which would include both roses and traditional Middle Eastern flowers that held special significance for the family. The women also shared stories about their own weddings, some from decades past and others more recent. Catherine was fascinated by how wedding traditions had evolved over the generations while maintaining their essential meaning and importance. Older women described celebrations that had been smaller and more focused on immediate family, while younger women talked about incorporating elements from other cultures they had encountered through education or travel. One of Amira's sisters, Nadia, was particularly interested in Catherine's work as an anthropologist and asked thoughtful questions about how different cultures celebrated major life events. This led to a fascinating discussion about wedding traditions around the world, with Catherine sharing stories from her research and the women contributing their knowledge of customs they had learned about through friends, travel, or international media. As the henna ceremony continued, musicians arrived to provide traditional entertainment. The women formed a circle and began singing traditional Arabic songs, some accompanying themselves with small handheld drums and tambourines. The melodies were haunting and beautiful, and even though Catherine couldn't understand the words, she could feel the emotion and joy being expressed through the music. Some of the younger women pulled Catherine into the circle, teaching her simple dance steps and encouraging her to participate in the singing even if she only hummed along with the melodies. This was one of those moments that reminded Catherine why she had chosen to study human cultures. These universal experiences of joy, celebration, and community that transcended language and cultural barriers. During a break in the music, Catherine found herself in conversation with several women about her impressions of Jordan and her friendship with Amira. They were curious about life in America and asked questions about everything from career opportunities for women to cultural traditions to family structures. Catherine tried to answer their questions thoughtfully, being honest about both the positive aspects and the challenges of American society. One conversation that particularly touched Catherine was with Amira's mother about their daughter's time in the United States. When Amira went to America for university, I was so worried, Layla confided. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I was afraid she might forget her roots or decide not to come home. But you were such a good friend to her. She told me how you helped her feel less homesick and encouraged her to stay connected to her heritage even while she was learning new things. This conversation helped Catherine understand something important about her role in this celebration. She wasn't just attending as Amira's friend, she was also representing the experiences and friendships that had shaped Amira during her time away from Jordan. The family's warmth toward her was partly gratitude for being part of Amira's support system during those formative years. As the evening wound down, Catherine realized that this intimate gathering had given her insights into Jordanian culture that she never could have gained through books or formal study. She had experienced firsthand the importance of family connections, the respect for elders, the joy in sharing food and music, and the way that traditions were passed down from generation to generation while still allowing for individual expression and growth. When it was time for Catherine to return to her hotel, the goodbyes took nearly an hour as each woman insisted on personally wishing her well for the following day's celebration. Many of them promised to look for her at the wedding and introduce her to their husbands and children. Amira's mother made Catherine promise to visit again, with or without a wedding as an excuse, and assured her that she would always have a home in Jordan. The taxi ride back to her hotel was quiet and reflective. Catherine looked at her hands, now decorated with beautiful henna patterns, and thought about the evening's experiences. She felt honored to have been included so completely in such a personal family celebration, and she had a much deeper understanding of the cultural context for tomorrow's wedding. Back in her hotel room, Catherine carefully avoided smudging her henna as she prepared for bed. The patterns were still dark and wet, and Fatima had instructed her to let them dry completely overnight for the best color. As she settled into bed, Catherine felt more confident than ever about her choice of the emerald dress. After tonight's experience, she understood that what mattered most to this family was not fashion or ostentation, but respect, authenticity, and the sincere intention to honor their celebration. The next morning brought the wedding day itself, and Catherine woke early with excitement and anticipation. The henna on her hands had dried to a beautiful reddish-brown color, and the intricate patterns were even more striking in the daylight. She took pictures to send to friends back home, knowing that this visible reminder of her experience would generate many questions and conversations about her trip. Catherine spent the morning exploring more of Amman, visiting a museum that showcased Jordan's rich archaeological heritage, and taking a walk through one of the city's beautiful parks. She wanted to learn as much as possible about the country during her visit, understanding that this might be her only opportunity to experience Jordan as more than just a tourist destination. As afternoon approached, Catherine returned to her hotel to begin preparing for the main wedding celebration. She took a long bath, being careful not to let the water touch her henna-decorated hands for too long, and then began the process of getting ready for what she knew would be an evening unlike any other she had experienced. The emerald dress looked even more beautiful than she had remembered, and as she put it on, Catherine felt a sense of quiet confidence. The color complemented her skin tone perfectly, and the Celtic-inspired embroidery caught the light in a way that was elegant without being flashy. The dress fit her perfectly, and, most importantly, it felt like her, while still being appropriate for the grandeur of the occasion ahead. As Catherine put the finishing touches on her appearance, checking that her jewelry was understated and elegant, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the first moment she had received Amira's invitation to the henna ceremony the night before, every experience had reinforced her belief that authenticity and respect could coexist beautifully. Tonight would be the culmination of this learning process, as she joined hundreds of other guests in celebrating her friend's marriage in one of Amman's most prestigious venues. The Royal Palace Hotel was renowned for hosting the most significant social events in Jordan, and Catherine knew that tonight's celebration would be a showcase of Jordanian hospitality, tradition, and joy on a grand scale. As she prepared to leave her hotel room, Catherine felt ready to embrace whatever experiences the evening would bring, confident in her choices and grateful for the opportunity to be part of such a meaningful celebration. The Royal Palace Hotel stood majestically against the Amman skyline, its golden limestone facade glowing in the late afternoon sun as Catherine's taxi approached the grand entrance. Even from a distance, she could see that this was going to be a celebration on a scale she had never witnessed before. Luxury cars lined the curved driveway, and elegantly dressed guests were making their way through the ornate entrance doors, where uniformed staff greeted each arrival with traditional Arabic hospitality. Catherine paid her taxi driver and stepped out onto the red carpet that had been laid from the curb to the hotel entrance. As she walked toward the doors, she could hear the sounds of live, traditional music coming from somewhere within the building, and the air was filled with the fragrance of jasmine and roses from the elaborate floral arrangements that decorated every surface. The hotel lobby had been transformed into something that looked like a scene from Arabian Nights. Massive crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble floors inlaid with intricate geometric patterns, and the walls were draped with rich fabrics in deep jewel tones. Staff members in traditional Jordanian dress guided guests toward the ballroom, offering small glasses of welcome drinks and ensuring that everyone felt properly greeted and oriented. As Catherine made her way through the lobby, she was struck by the incredible diversity of the guest list. There were clearly many prominent Jordanian families present, with women wearing elaborate gowns and stunning jewelry, and men in perfectly tailored suits or traditional Arabic dress. But there were also guests who had obviously traveled from other countries, speaking various languages, and wearing clothing that reflected different cultural backgrounds. The ballroom itself was breathtaking. The ceiling soared high overhead, decorated with painted stars and crescent moons that seemed to twinkle in the light from dozens of crystal chandeliers. Round tables were set with fine china, crystal glasses, and silverware that gleamed under the warm lighting. Each table was decorated with centerpieces of white roses, jasmine, and traditional Middle Eastern flowers, surrounded by gold accents and small candles that created an atmosphere of intimate elegance despite the room's grand scale. Catherine was directed to her assigned table, which was near enough to the head table to have a good view of the proceedings, but not so close as to be intrusive. As she took her seat, she was pleased to discover that she was sitting with an interesting mix of guests, including several of Amira's university friends who had traveled from different countries, a few family friends who spoke excellent English, and a couple from the groom's side who were involved in international business. The conversation at her table was lively and engaging from the moment everyone was seated. Catherine found herself talking with a woman named Rana, who worked for the United Nations in refugee assistance programs, and they discovered they had many common interests related to cross-cultural understanding and humanitarian work. There was also a gentleman named Khalil who had studied in London and was now back in Jordan working in sustainable energy development, and his wife Sarah, who was a pediatrician at one of Amman's leading hospitals. As they chatted over the first course, which was an exquisite selection of traditional Middle Eastern appetizers, Catherine realized that this was exactly the kind of international, educated, socially conscious crowd that would naturally surround Amira and Omar. These were people who were deeply rooted in their Jordanian heritage, but also globally minded, working to make positive changes in their country and the world. The conversation at the table naturally turned to Catherine's background and her impressions of Jordan. When she mentioned that she was an anthropologist studying cultural traditions, several people became very interested and began sharing their own perspectives on how Jordanian culture was evolving in response to globalization while maintaining its essential character. It was exactly the kind of thoughtful, nuanced discussion that Catherine most enjoyed, and she felt grateful to be surrounded by such articulate and insightful people. As dinner progressed through multiple courses, each more delicious than the last, Catherine found herself completely absorbed in the celebration. The food was a perfect blend of traditional Jordanian cuisine and international dishes prepared with obvious care and artistry. There were lamb dishes seasoned with aromatic spices, rice preparations that seemed to capture the essence of Middle Eastern cooking, and vegetable dishes that showcased the natural flavors of locally grown produce. Between courses, there were speeches and toasts that celebrated the couple and their families. Even though many were given in Arabic, English translations were provided, and Catherine was moved by the heartfelt words of love, respect, and hope that were expressed by family members and close friends. The speeches painted a picture of two young people who were not only deeply in love, but also committed to using their lives and careers to make positive contributions to their community and country. When Omar's father rose to speak about his new daughter-in-law, his words were particularly touching. He spoke about how Amira had won their family's hearts not just through her love for their son, but through her dedication to helping others and her respect for tradition combined with her progressive thinking about women's roles in society. She represents the best of modern Jordanian womanhood, he said, educated, confident, and caring, but never forgetting the values that have sustained our families for generations. As the formal dinner portion of the evening concluded, the tables were cleared to make room for dancing. A traditional Arabic band took the stage, and the music that filled the ballroom was both ancient and contemporary, featuring traditional instruments alongside modern arrangements. The dance floor quickly filled with guests of all ages, from small children to elderly grandparents, all moving together in celebration of the couple's union. Catherine watched from her table as the bride and groom took the floor for their first dance, and she was struck by how perfectly they seemed to complement each other. Amira was radiant in her wedding gown, which managed to be both traditionally modest and breathtakingly elegant. Omar gazed at his new wife with obvious adoration, and their happiness was so evident that Catherine found herself tearing up with joy for her friend. As the evening progressed, Catherine was repeatedly invited to join the dancing, and she discovered that her table mates were excellent teachers when it came to traditional Arabic dance steps. The music was infectious, and the atmosphere was so joyful that even her usual self-consciousness about dancing in public melted away. She found herself laughing and moving to rhythms she had never heard before, but which somehow felt natural and celebratory. During one of the dance breaks, Catherine was approached by several women she had met at the henna ceremony the night before. They were effusive in their compliments about her dress, and she was touched by their genuine appreciation for her choice. "You look beautiful," Amira's cousin told her. "The color is perfect for you, and the style is so elegant. Where did you find such a lovely dress?" When Catherine explained that she had worked with a seamstress to create something that would be respectful of the occasion while reflecting her own heritage, the women were even more impressed. "This is exactly right," said Amira's aunt. "You honored our celebration, but stayed true to yourself. This shows real wisdom and respect." These conversations were happening throughout the evening, and Catherine began to realize that her thoughtful approach to the wedding had resonated with more people than she had expected. Guests approached her to compliment not just her appearance, but her obvious effort to understand and respect Jordanian customs while maintaining her own identity. The Celtic embroidery on her dress, in particular, generated many interested questions about her Irish heritage, leading to fascinating exchanges about different cultural traditions and the ways that immigrants had contributed to American society. At one point during the evening, Catherine found herself in conversation with a group of young Jordanian women who were curious about her work as an anthropologist. They asked thoughtful questions about cultural preservation in a globalizing world and shared their own experiences of trying to balance traditional values with modern opportunities. The conversation was so engaging that Catherine realized she had found potential collaborators for future research projects, and several of the women expressed interest in staying in touch to continue their discussions. As the evening reached its climax, there was a special moment when all the unmarried women were invited to gather around the bride for the traditional bouquet toss. Catherine joined the group somewhat reluctantly, feeling that as a guest from another culture, she should perhaps just observe this tradition rather than participate. But Amira spotted her in the crowd and called out, "Catherine, you have to try to catch it. For luck." When the bouquet sailed through the air, it seemed to head directly toward Catherine, and despite her instinctive attempt to deflect it to someone else, she ended up catching the flowers. The crowd cheered, and she found herself blushing and laughing as women around her offered congratulations and predictions about her romantic future. It was a moment of pure joy and spontaneous celebration that perfectly captured the spirit of the entire evening. Near the end of the celebration, as guests began to say their goodbyes and express their gratitude to the families, Catherine had the opportunity to spend a few private moments with Amira. Despite the whirlwind of the evening, her friend looked completely happy and not at all exhausted by the elaborate celebration. "Catherine, thank you so much for being here," Amira said, holding both of Catherine's hands and admiring the henna patterns that were still clearly visible. "Having you here made this perfect. You brought a piece of my American experience into this very Jordanian celebration, and somehow that made everything feel complete." Catherine was moved by her friend's words, but she felt that she was the one who had received the greater gift. "This has been incredible, Amira. Your family, your friends, your culture, everything about this celebration has been more beautiful than I could have imagined. I feel so honored to have been included." As Catherine prepared to leave the hotel, many guests stopped her to express their pleasure at meeting her and to invite her to visit again. Omar's family, in particular, made sure she knew that she would always be welcome in their home, and several family members gave her their contact information with genuine invitations to return to Jordan whenever she could. The taxi ride back to her hotel was quiet and reflective. Catherine looked out at the lights of Amman passing by and thought about the evening's experiences. She had attended many weddings in her life, but none had been quite like this one. The combination of grandeur and intimacy, tradition and modernity, formality and genuine warmth had created something truly special. More importantly, Catherine realized that her approach to the evening had been successful in ways she hadn't anticipated. By choosing to be authentically herself while showing respect for local customs, she had not only felt comfortable and confident, but had also made meaningful connections with people who appreciated her thoughtfulness and sincerity. The emerald dress had been perfect, not because it was the most expensive or fashionable option, but because it had allowed her to express her true self while honoring the significance of the occasion. As she prepared for bed in her hotel room, still wearing the beautiful dress and looking at her henna-decorated hands, Catherine reflected on what she had learned during her time in Jordan. She had discovered that true respect for other cultures didn't require abandoning your own identity, but rather finding ways to express your authentic self while showing genuine appreciation for different traditions and values. The wedding celebration had been a masterpiece of cultural expression, bringing together ancient traditions and contemporary sensibilities in a way that felt both timeless and perfectly relevant to modern life. Catherine felt grateful not only for the opportunity to witness such a beautiful celebration, but also for the friendships she had formed and the insights she had gained into Jordanian society and culture. Tomorrow she would begin her journey back to Boston, but she knew that the memories and relationships from this trip would last much longer than the henna patterns on her hands. She had experienced something truly special, and in doing so, had also learned something important about the power of authenticity, respect, and genuine human connection to bridge cultural differences and create meaningful shared experiences. Catherine woke on her final morning in Jordan with mixed feelings of satisfaction and sadness. Her flight back to Boston wasn't until the evening, giving her one last day to explore Amman and reflect on the extraordinary experiences of the past few days. As she prepared for the day ahead, she could still see the fading henna patterns on her hands, a visible reminder of the warmth and hospitality she had encountered. The hotel staff had arranged for her to store her luggage and have a late checkout, allowing her to spend the day sightseeing without worrying about her belongings. Catherine had planned to visit some of the archaeological sites she hadn't had time to see earlier, particularly the ancient Roman ruins on Jabal al-Khalawe, which offered panoramic views of the city and housed some of Jordan's most significant historical artifacts. As she made her way through the hotel lobby, Catherine was surprised to encounter several guests from the wedding who were also staying at the same hotel. Word had somehow spread about her thoughtful approach to the celebration, and she found herself receiving compliments and invitations for future visits that were clearly sincere rather than merely polite. Khalil and Sarah, the couple she had sat with at dinner, were having breakfast and invited Catherine to join them. Over coffee and traditional Jordanian pastries, they continued the conversations that had begun the night before, discussing everything from sustainable development in the Middle East to the challenges and opportunities facing educated young professionals in Jordan. "What impressed us most about you last night," Sarah said, "was how you managed to fit in so perfectly while obviously being yourself. So many foreign guests at these big celebrations either try too hard to adopt local customs and end up looking like they're wearing costumes, or they completely ignore local traditions and seem disrespectful. You found exactly the right balance." This conversation reinforced something that Catherine had been thinking about since the wedding. Her choice of the emerald dress had worked not because of any particular fashion sense she possessed, but because it had been made with careful thought about both honoring her hosts and staying true to her own identity. The dress had become a symbol of the broader approach she had taken to the entire Jordan experience. After breakfast, Catherine took a taxi to the Citadel, the ancient site that sits atop one of Amman's 7 hills and offers the best vantage point for understanding the city's geography and history. As she walked among the Roman, Byzantine, and early Islamic ruins, she thought about the layers of civilization that had built upon each other in this place, creating something that was both ancient and contemporary. The view from the Citadel was breathtaking, allowing Catherine to see the entire city spread out below her. She could identify some of the neighborhoods she had visited, including the area where Amir's family lived and the location of the Royal Palace Hotel where the wedding had taken place. From this elevated perspective, Amman looked like a tapestry of old and new, with ancient stone buildings nestled among modern glass and steel structures. While exploring the Citadel's museum, Catherine encountered a group of international visitors who had heard about her attendance at the wedding the night before. Word about her respectful and authentic approach to the celebration had apparently spread beyond the wedding guests themselves, and these tourists were curious about her experiences and insights into Jordanian culture. Catherine found herself in an impromptu role as cultural interpreter, sharing what she had learned about Jordanian hospitality, family traditions, and the ways that modern Jordanian society balanced traditional values with contemporary realities. She talked about the henna ceremony, the significance of the wedding traditions she had witnessed, and the impressive sophistication and international perspective of the young Jordanians she had met. One of the tourists, a woman from Germany who was traveling through the Middle East, was particularly interested in Catherine's approach to cross-cultural respect. "I'm struggling with knowing how to dress and behave appropriately in different countries," she admitted. "I want to be respectful, but I also don't want to pretend to be something I'm not. How did you figure out the right approach? Catherine found herself articulating thoughts that she hadn't fully formed until that moment. I think the key was focusing on the intention behind the customs rather than just copying the external forms, she explained. I try to understand what respect and appreciation looked like in this context, and then find ways to express those values through my own cultural lens rather than trying to adopt customs that weren't authentically mine. This conversation continued as the group explored more of the Citadel together, and Catherine realized that her Jordan experience was generating insights that could be valuable beyond just personal memories. Her approach to cross-cultural respect and authentic engagement might be worth sharing more broadly, perhaps through her academic work or travel writing. As the afternoon progressed, Catherine made her way to the famous Rainbow Street area, known for its cafes, galleries, and shops that showcase contemporary Jordanian culture alongside traditional crafts. She wanted to find some meaningful souvenirs to take back to Boston, items that would remind her of this trip while also representing the best of Jordanian artistry and culture. In one of the galleries, Catherine discovered the work of a young Jordanian artist who created beautiful textiles that blended traditional Middle Eastern patterns with contemporary design sensibilities. The pieces were stunning, and Catherine found herself in conversation with the artist about the inspiration for her work and the challenges of maintaining cultural authenticity while appealing to international markets. Your approach to our wedding celebration has been talked about quite a bit today, the artist mentioned during their conversation. Several people have mentioned meeting an American anthropologist who showed such thoughtful respect for our traditions while obviously being comfortable with herself. It's exactly the kind of cross-cultural appreciation that we hope to see more of. Catherine was both surprised and pleased to learn that her approach had generated positive attention beyond just the immediate wedding guests. It suggested that her careful balance of authenticity and respect had resonated with people in ways she hadn't anticipated, potentially contributing to positive perceptions of American visitors and cross-cultural exchange more generally. As her time in Amman drew to a close, Catherine made one final stop at the hotel where the wedding had been held. She wanted to see the ballroom in daylight and reflect on the previous evening's experiences without the excitement and stimulation of the actual celebration. The hotel staff remembered her from the night before and were happy to show her around, proud of the successful event they had helped create. Looking at the ballroom in afternoon sunlight streaming through tall windows, Catherine could still imagine the magical atmosphere of the wedding celebration. The space looked different without the elaborate decorations and hundreds of guests, but it retained an elegance that spoke to both the venue's quality and the care that had been taken with every detail of Amira and Omar's celebration. As Catherine prepared to leave for the airport, she received a text message from Amira, who was spending her first day as a married woman with Omar's extended family. Catherine, thank you again for everything. Everyone is still talking about what a wonderful addition you were to our celebration. You showed exactly what friendship and respect look like, and you honored both our cultures beautifully. Safe travels, and please come back soon. The message brought tears to Catherine's eyes, partly because of the friendship it represented, but also because of the recognition that she had successfully navigated a complex cultural situation in a way that had enhanced rather than detracted from her friend's special day. Her choices had been validated not just by her own comfort level, but by the positive impact they had had on others. The taxi ride to Queen Alia International Airport gave Catherine one last opportunity to see the Jordanian landscape and reflect on her experiences. She thought about the journey from receiving Amira's wedding invitation to sitting in this taxi with henna-decorated hands and a suitcase full of meaningful memories and beautiful souvenirs. Every step of the process had been a learning experience, from researching appropriate attire to experiencing traditional celebrations to forming new friendships with people from different cultural backgrounds. As her plane took off from Amman and she watched the lights of the city disappear below, Catherine felt profoundly grateful for the opportunity she had been given. The wedding invitation had turned into something much larger than just attending a friend's celebration. It had become a masterclass in cross-cultural respect, authentic engagement, and the power of thoughtful choices to create positive connections across different traditions and backgrounds. During the long flight back to Boston, Catherine began writing in her journal about the experiences and insights from her Jordan trip. She found herself articulating ideas about cultural exchange, authentic respect, and the importance of staying true to yourself while honoring others that she thought might be valuable to share more broadly. Perhaps this experience could contribute to her academic work or inspire others who were navigating similar cross-cultural situations. The emerald dress, carefully packed in her suitcase, had become more than just a beautiful garment. It represented the successful integration of careful research, respectful intention, and authentic self-expression that had made her Jordan experience so meaningful. The Celtic embroidery that had honored her Irish heritage while fitting appropriately into a Jordanian celebration symbolized the broader possibility of cultural exchange that enriched rather than diminished individual identity. When Catherine arrived back in Boston and unpacked her suitcase in her familiar apartment, she was struck by how different she felt despite being in the same physical space she had left just a few days earlier. The souvenirs she had purchased were beautiful, but the real treasure she had brought back were the relationships she had formed, the insights she had gained, and the confidence she now felt about engaging authentically with different cultures. Over the following weeks, Catherine found herself sharing her Jordan experiences with friends, colleagues, and students. The story of the wedding, and particularly her approach to participating respectfully while staying true to herself, resonated with many people who had faced similar challenges in their own cross-cultural encounters. She began to realize that her experience might have broader applications for anyone trying to navigate cultural differences with grace and authenticity. The henna patterns on her hands gradually faded, but the memories and relationships from Jordan remained vivid and meaningful. Catherine stayed in touch with Amira and several of the other people she had met, following their lives through social media and occasional video calls. The connection she had made during those few days in Amman proved to be lasting rather than merely circumstantial. Looking back on the experience months later, Catherine realized that the Jordan trip had changed her in ways that extended beyond just personal memories or cultural knowledge. It had validated her belief that authentic respect and genuine curiosity could bridge cultural differences and create meaningful connections between people from very different backgrounds. The wedding celebration had been beautiful, but the real gift had been the demonstration that thoughtful engagement with other cultures could enrich everyone involved. Catherine's emerald dress hung in her closet as a reminder of one of the most meaningful experiences of her life. Occasionally, when she was preparing for academic conferences or other professional events, she would consider wearing it again, knowing that it carried the memory of a perfect evening when she had found exactly the right balance between honoring others and being true to herself. The dress had become a symbol of the possibility that respect and authenticity could coexist beautifully, creating experiences that honored all the cultures and individuals involved. The story of Catherine's appearance at Amir's Jordanian wedding became one that was told and retold, inspiring others to approach cross-cultural situations with the same thoughtful combination of research, respect, and authentic self-expression. It demonstrated that the most memorable and meaningful cultural exchanges happen not when people try to become something they weren't, but when they found ways to express their truest selves while honoring the traditions and values of others.